Hey VR fans, today we are going to be reviewing one of the best-selling fat tire e-bikes. In fact, some people might even call it the king of the hill when it comes to fat tires. That is the Aventon Aventure.2, and it's a bike that has been out for about a year now, this current version, and we haven't covered it. There's been a lot of chatter and discussion in the EVR forums, but we haven't brought you the review yet, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Stay tuned and let's see if this bike still belongs at the top of that hill. All right, so starting out, just looking at this bike, again, looks are very personal for me. And then also I'm basing this off of a lot of other people's responses. I probably sent, 20 or 30 people out on this bike. I think it's a really good looking bike. It looks pretty beefy. It is fairly beefy. It's 78 pounds total. If you take out the battery, which is just on this backside here, this down tube, if you take that out, you lose just about 10 pounds. It goes down to 68.7 pounds, when you do remove that battery there. It's an aluminum alloy frame, 400-pound weight limit. I will say I've put some pretty big riders on this bike, and if you are upward 250, 300 pounds, this is a really good bike that you should consider. You'll notice it has, here on this rear triangle, you've got nice thick seat stays, nice thick chain stays down here. And then this is the high step version. Even though it's a high step version, you have a little bit of a swoop down through here. So that kind of just improves the approachability of the bike and gives it a little better, easier standover height. But the frame still is very rigid because it is that high step. In fact, we've been doing we're calling it wobble testing on these fat tires, because that's just a lot of weight in the front and the rear tire, especially when you throw a rack on. And this is one of the most firm fat tire e-bikes, the 26-inch fat tire e-bikes that we've tested. And I think a lot of that is because of that, aluminum alloy frame, with how they've really beefed up that rear triangle and that high step with the swoop. It's just, again, it looks nice, it's very approachable, but it is very firm. A couple of the details on that standover height with that swoop, you've got it's 665 millimeters for the regular version, 713 millimeters for the large. This is the large. For me, I'm 5'11". I don't have any problems at all standing over this, and it's really nice. Now, one thing that a lot of people also comment on with this bike is just how comfortable it is in general. The reach, I think they've just done a good job. It's a 365 millimeter reach. So again, from here up to here, you'll notice the handlebars are a little bit swept back there. So it's not a super long reach. You're still in somewhat of an upright position. And the bike isn't super long. It's 1,141 millimeter on the length there for the wheelbase, and so it's fairly compact. And again, it's not like super aggressive stance like a mountain bike would be, and so it's just a little more comfortable, which works really well if you're looking at this from a commuter / off-road bike. Diving into some of the other details here, you've got fenders on the front, fenders on the back, and you'll hear that, they're steel fenders. So very solid, very stable, very firm. Personally, again, this is personal opinion, I actually prefer probably plastic fenders. Some people might think that's a little cheap and expensive to go plastic, but if you get like a rock, so say I've got a rock here, I just hits it, you kind of hear it. Let me show that a little better. See if I can get it on camera. There we go. You can hear it. So you'll get a little bit more if you're kind of off-road and kind of flipping some rocks up there. Not a big deal. They're very firm. We've had this bike for about a year now and haven't had any issues with them. Next, I want to point out kind of the mounting points. So Here on the down tube, you've got a two points there for a water bottle, and you'll notice there's enough kind of distance here where you can put a kind of an oversized water bottle. I like to get kind of a oversized insulated bottle personally. You've got the rear rack, so that's, you know, you don't have mounting points here on the seat stays, but you do have this rear rack that has a max capacity of 25 kilograms or 55 pounds. Moving to the front, you'll notice you do have some mounting points here on the head tube. Both sides there for a rack if you'd like. Personally, I prefer loading this up more with pannier bags or some type of basket in the rear versus the front. When you get to that fork and you start compressing that with the weight up front, it just changes the ride handling a little bit, but yes, you can do that. Next, this is obvious, kind of an obvious thing, but it's a fat tire. So you've got 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires, and the recommended PSI on them, it says 5 to 15 with a max of 30 PSI. If I'm commuting, I find myself putting about 25 PSI in. If I'm taking it kind of off-road, like in a situation like this, I'll lower it down probably to about 15, maybe 10. I generally wouldn't go to 5. You know, I think you might be able to if you're a lighter weight rider. You have these really wide rims here. See if I can get a good shot there. And that just helps prevent the tire from bulging on the side here when you air that down, so it can kind of act as some suspension, make it nice and a comfortable ride without dinging this rim. It's not a carbon rim. I'm pretty sure it's just aluminum. So it'll bend a little bit and you can be fine, but you still don't want to ding that. So just make sure when you do put pressure that you don't get too much bulge here, and that there's enough air to support your personal weight. If you're up over that 250 pounds, I'd go above their recommended. If you're, super lightweight, $130, then you can absolutely go lower. There is a integrated front headlight here. And I would say this is more to be seen than to see. It doesn't have a massive amount of spread. Sorry, it's not dark. I can't show you. It's kind of tight on the spread. Decent brightness, but if you start getting up, this can be a class 3 bike. If you get up to 28 miles per hour, you're going to want a little more light if you're commuting or riding off-road in the night. But I like that it's there. Makes it safe to be seen. And along that, you also have the rear here. You've got rear tail lights on the right and on the left. And let me turn this on here. So you see they're we're in broad daylight here. You can see them. And if you just come up here, if you click the left button, you'll notice you've got a left flashing. To turn that off, you just come back up here again, and you click that again, and it turns it off and just goes back to the light. To turn the lights on and off, you just hold the up button or this plus button here for a couple seconds, and it turns it off or turns it on, whichever you like. My recommendation is actually just to leave those running. Even in daylight, it can kind of help your visibility, and I'm always a big fan of visibility and safety. So kind of overall, from just a overall kind of build quality and my thoughts on it is, I'm going to go back to kind of how firm this frame feels. It really does feel nice and solid and stiff. If you load up the rear, yeah, you can get a little bit of flex on it, but that's kind of normal. And I'd say it's better than average there with that. And just overall good quality construction, good feel to the bike. Like I said, I probably put 20 or 30 people on this bike, and without fail, I always get back, oh, that bike is really comfortable. And it's just like they've nailed the geometry on the bike and just made it a good bike for a vast majority of riders. In fact, I've never had someone jump on this bike and say, oh, it just doesn't feel very good. I don't really like this bike. It's never been that. Even if it wasn't their top pick on a fat tire, it was right up there from a feel, from a comfort, from a stability standpoint. So I think Aventon did a great job on that. Okay, so next up, we're going to dive into what I consider the heart and soul of an e-bike, which is the motor, the battery, the electronic part. So this bike here, it has, now Aventon doesn't make their own motors. It says Aventon on it, but it's not necessarily theirs per se. It is a 750 watt rear hub motor. It has 80 newton meters of torque. I confirmed that with them. And it comes out of the box set to class 2, but you can unlock it and go up to 28 miles per hour. So, when it comes out of the box, again, you can see here, they've got the stamp where it says class 2, 20 miles per hour. Let me come to the other side so you can see that. A lot of municipalities only allow class 2. So if that's yours, you can leave it at that, or again, you can unlock this and make it a class 3. So that'd be throttle assist up to 20, pedal assist up to 28. And I will say, in my experience riding this bike, again, I do all the hill tests for Electric Bike Report. My experience is that this is one of the more powerful rear hub fat tire e-bikes. That 80 newton meters of torque, you really feel it. And it is kind of that top tier in terms of power output. And so just, again, it's a really good motor. We put a lot of miles on this thing. My dad has one of these, has put a ton of miles on it, and it's just held up and it's done really good. Battery wise, the battery is UL certified to 2849. It's stored in that down tube right there. So nice, really slick, kind of sleek integration. And if you notice, again, it's from the side. So sometimes if these are integrated into the bottom here, they can be hard to get out, bumping up against here. And so they've elected to go to the side, which makes it easy to remove, which I think is a good move, especially for people looking to put this on a rack. A little bit harder to lift, carry. It's just kind of nice. Or if you want to take that inside and charge it, super easy. You just unlock it with the key, pop it out right there. You also charging port down here, and it's a 3-prong charging charging port, which I think is a little better than a single prong. Just good overall. The battery is a 48 volt, 15 amp hour battery, so 720 watt hours is the capacity. And they give you a stated range up to 60 miles per charge. That matches the test results that the team at Electric Bike Report got in their world test. They got between 30 and 59. And I don't think people understand how far that really is. To go 30 to 60 miles on a bike is really far. If you are taking this maybe camping, and don't want to have to charge it for 2 weeks, then yeah, get an extra battery, but you've got really good range on this. The highlight of all of this, though, is actually probably the torque sensor. That's the biggest upgrade from this version versus the previous. And it just gives it a little more dialed feel, I think. How that works is kind of when you'd be doing the other way. I can't do that and not move it. But as you turn the pedals, it's going to measure the amount of watts that you're pushing in and kind of output power based on that. And so it just gives it a more natural feel to it in general. And I think it's just a better overall experience than a cadence sensor. And I'll kind of, to kind of expand on the importance of why I like the torque sensor so much, is it really lets you regulate your own speed in between the PAS settings. So if it goes from 1 to 4, 1 to 5, and on a cadence sensor, you're almost kind of stuck. Okay, PS1 is going to give me 12 miles per hour no matter what I'm pedaling. It's going to give me 16 on PS3, 20 on PS4, and so forth. But a cadence sensor, you can put it on PS5, but go a little slower if you put less wattage into the pedals. So it lets you dial in your speed a little bit more and control how much assistance you want for the motor. So 2 thumbs up from Aventon for moving to that. We've seen a lot of other bikes do that in the past year. Aventon was one of the first, and I just want to point that out and make sure that they're still getting credit for doing that on this bike. So let's dive into some of the other components on the bike. This comes with a Shimano 8-speed derailleur. So here you see the Shimano Altus. It does have the cage here to protect the derailleur, which is nice in case it falls. Falls down. You've got the 8 speeds there. You can see that. And another note that I'll point out is this is a zinc coated chain, and so that'll just help it hold up a little bit more if you're in salty air conditions. So if you're by the ocean, by the beach, if you're one of those lucky people, then this will just last a little bit longer, which is just a nice little touch. The front chainring, you'll notice, is fairly large. It's a 48 tooth front chainring, and up front you do have rapid fire thumb shifters here. You shift there, and then you can pull with your index finger to shift. So Shimano Altus, it's a well-known brand, easy to service, easy to shift. Just gives it a good overall, quality drivetrain. And I just think that's a good move by Aventon. On the brake side of things, they also went with name brand. So Tektro, their HD30s. The lever, very easy. You can do one finger. You can do one finger, or let's see if I can show it. I'll do it from the side. One finger or 2 finger grip. For me, I'd probably do one on these ones. But again, that's up to you. So Tektro HD30s. They are hydraulic disc brakes, so you will have to service that mineral oil, bleed the brakes. The rotors are 180 mil rotors in the rear and 180 mil rotors in the front, and they are 1.8 millimeters thick. Now, I think you could make an argument that, hey, let's upgrade these to 2.3 millimeters thick. If like when we talk to Ben, the mechanic, that's kind of what he says. In the real world, I'm going to be honest, these actually stop really well. If you look at the brake test that other reviewers have done, Electric Bike Report, myself, like, it stops really well. And again, the Adventure was one of the early adopters of hydraulic disc brakes, and they've continued that. They moved to Tektro brand, so I think just a good job there too. Moving on, kickstand right here. You'll notice it's a little farther back, and the nice thing there is it doesn't ever get in the way of the pedal. So if you're moving around in your garage, you can move it backwards, and as you move backwards, the pedal will spin. It's not going to get caught here. So just a nice little touch. Good thing that they've done there. The saddle. Now, saddles are always very personal. This is a Velo saddle, branded Aventon. I find it comfortable. To be honest, I do a lot of mountain biking, and I don't wear a chamois too often, so I can pretty much sit on anything. So take that for what it's worth. But I do think it's a good shape for most rear ends on that. Now, moving up to the fork. It's an 80 millimeter travel fork, okay? And you do have a lockout on the left, so right here. So you can lock it if you want, full lockout, partial lockout. On the right, there's some preload adjustment, okay? So if you are someone who is heavier, then I would recommend preloading. I mean, you can sit on the bike, and if you want to get super scientific, measure how much these go down and kind of preload it to about 25 or 30%. So where you're sitting, this sags in just about 20 or 25% of this already. That'll give you a good feel. Or you can just do it how you feel and what you prefer. If you're commuting, you might want to lock this out or preload it even more to make it stiffer, lock it out on the side. Frankly, because you got a motor, I never lock this thing out. I don't personally have to adjust the preload. For me, I'm about 180, 185 pounds, depending on what I ate. But if you are over 200 or so, you're going to start to probably want to adjust that preload. The stanchions on this, so the stanchions are this area right here. They are 32 millimeter stanchions, which is good diameter, gives it nice strong support as it compresses and does a lot. As you come down here, you'll notice it is threaded here with a nut lock, so it's not a quick release. It's a nutted through axle. You can make an argument that it'd be nice if this was not a nutted or quick release, it was just a solid through axle front fork. It would stiffen up this ride just a little bit, but to be honest, this is one of the stiffer, better ride qualities anyways, and to get a fork that's that high quality, you're gonna have to spend quite a bit of money. So I think they'd start to struggle with all the good quality components that they put on this. If they put on that through axle fork, I think you'd start to see this creep above the $2,000 price point. So I don't think that was a good move. I don't think that would be a good move necessarily, unless they could find a way to reduce the cost on that. Last thing that I wanted to kind of just point to is on this steerer tube. So this right here is the steerer tube, and it's not a tapered steerer tube. So this size here, 1 1/8 is the same as down here, 1 1/8. Aventon could taper this to 1 1/8, go and kind of taper out wide to 1.5 to give it again a little stiffer, more stable ride there. That's what a lot of mountain bikes have. Kind of a small detail. I'm getting really nitpicky, but I find that I have to get nitpicky on this bike in order to give any feedback to Aventon on things that I'd like to see on the next version. Okay, so moving to the cockpit. First thing you'll notice, the handlebars, they're 680 millimeter wide handlebars. So kind of a nice happy medium. They're not too narrow where the bike feels a little squirrely, not too wide where it feels a little like you're trying to be super aggressive on a mountain bike. So it's just really nice width, I think, for this style of bike. You'll notice there's a little bit of a rise and a little teeny bit of a kind of an angle on the sweep back here. So it just gives a nice comfortable, you still are leaning forward on these, but you're a little more seated upright. Where you're gripping it, they're nice rubber grips and they're dual locking. So you've got a lock here and a lock here, so it keeps them nice and firm. They're not going to move on you. Again, if you don't like the grips, you can swap them out, but I personally do like these grips. You've got a thumb throttle here. This is the controls. We'll get to the screen in a second. The app again, here's your 8-speed, rapid fire shifters here, your brake levers. There we go. So your brake levers, again, always ride with either 1 or 2 on it. You don't need 3 on this bike. It's a good grip, and you're fine with probably even just 1 if you're pretty used to it. If not, go with 2. And that's kind of for both sides. Again, personal preference there. Here's the headlight. The wires, you'll notice, are integrated and kind of wrapped up fairly nicely. This one wire, I would say, is the one dangling one. I'd probably tuck that in a little better. I think they could potentially wrap it here a little bit higher, and it would just make it look even cleaner. The challenge there then is these connections would be covered by the wrap. It's not hard to unwrap it. So that's, again, kind of personal preference. I personally like it wrapped a little higher. Some people, I think, would prefer to have those open so they can kind of manage it themselves and kind of change that up if they need to. But that's, the cockpit overall just adds to the nice, comfortable feel that they have. It is an adjustable. By adjustable, I mean you can, put on a different stem if you want. You could change the rise. You can put it, you can reduce some of these spacers if you want. So you can bring it forward, move it back if you change out this stem. Again, most people haven't needed to, but if you want to, you can play around with it and go crazy. Now for the app, to turn that on, make sure the bike is on. It's just this button right here, and it's just a click, one click there that does it. Kind of throws people off the first couple times. And then here you just hold down that power button and it turns on the app. Now, the app, you'll notice you've got your miles, your total time, your different assist levels. As you go up and down here, it will change the assist levels. You got Eco, Tour, Sport, and Turbo. This is where you do your blinkers. But if you double tap this, it changes the display So it shows your distance, your trip time, your calories burnt, average speed, max speed, and then it gives some kind of estimation on the CO2 you've removed from the atmosphere and how many trees you've saved. I have no idea how accurate that is. I'll let Aventon talk about that. But I think it's a cool reminder that, yeah, you're out using your, you're outside, you are using less gas, etc. Just go have fun. There's a trip A, there's a trip B. To go back to the normal setting, you're just going to click here twice. So just click, and it flips back to here. Now, if you click all the way up and hold it down, that's when the front light turns on. Here, so you can kind of see it. Okay, again, more to be seen than to see. You hold it down and it will turn that off. If you hold down here, as long as it's not off, and if it's an eco, tour, sport, or turbo, it will put it into walk mode. I'm not going to do that because then the bike lurches forward and it's hard to video it. But if you're walking up a steep hill or something like that and want some assistance, hold that down until it does. Just know that's going to kick in. It's going to start moving on you. Now, to get into the settings, you hold these two buttons down here. Oh, excuse me, not those two, these two. My bad. Choking on camera. Okay, so right here, and you can clear the trip data. Let's see if I can get a better angle here on this. Okay, so you can clear the trip data, change the screen brightness. You can go from 5 down to 1. I just keep it at 5. Set the unit between metric and imperial. System info will just tell you the e-bike name, the version, voltage, battery, etc. And then this connect to app, you go to connect to app and you scan that and it gets you in the Aventon app. And the Aventon app is pretty slick. Let me pull that up here for you. So I have connected to the app. So I can get my shadow out of the way here. What's this here? Okay, so here you can see the e-bike. It's connected here. You can turn the light on, turn it off. You see your total cycling time, the odometer, total calories, max speed, average speed, total CO2 reduced. Again, I guess that's assuming you're riding this instead of riding the car. And sync it to health. Here you can go into record, and you can kind of see your stats for the year, for the month, all time. Not all the riding I've done on this has been recorded. Sorry about that. If you hit go, that's where you can record your ride. So really nice that you can do that. And then discover is kind of a social aspect to this. So you can connect with people, leave questions for their customer service. I think that's kind of cool. And then me, it just shows you different metals and just kind of doing some things to try to, get you motivated to get out there. You can click on dealers, find some local dealers. You can pair, clear cache, optimize trajectory, which is basically just going to say, hey, go and make sure that you've always got location on and it's precise location. I don't use always, I just use while using the app for what it's worth. I haven't had any issues. So yeah, that's kind of what the app is. I think it's really cool that they're developing this app and that they have developed this app and that they're continuing to kind of put money into it, because it does just make it kind of a little more cool and high tech, but more functional on the bike. All right, now to the fun section of the review, which is I get to jump on this thing and ride it around. So the goal with this kind of riding segment is to give you an idea of what it's like to ride the bike. How does it shift? How does the motor feel? How does it perform off-road, on-road? So let's jump on the bike. We're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes on it and take it for a spin. Have some fun. All right, out here on the Adventure.2, and I'm starting off the off-road. A lot of people are going to buy this bike. We want to be able to take it off-road. Again, I'm going to make a distinction here between single track, your traditional mountain biking trails, and kind of, OHV trails, double track, things like this where, yeah, you're out camping, you're on the neighborhood, you want to just take it off-road a little bit with these, 26 by 4 inch tires with the front suspension. That's kind of what this bike is built for. And so, first up, it's a little bit windy, so sorry about that, but I will say the suspension and the tires, they do kind of smooth out these bumps a little bit here, where I feel very comfortable. You'll hear a little bit of rattling in the rear. You know, this is more of an entry-level drivetrain, so you expect some rattling. That's fine. It holds up to it just fine. The front fork with the 80 mil of travel, I did stiffen it up just a teeny bit to try to keep it not just a little smoother for the GoPro footage. I would normally just keep that fully open at, you know, 180, 185 pounds. So yeah, so there you hear a little bit of the rattling as I go over some of those bigger bumps. But I don't know, in general, it's actually pretty fun. So just out here cruising along, I could definitely do this for quite a while, feel very comfortable, and go explore. So yeah, I think it does a really good job there. Let's hop up now, hopping on the path, because the Adventure, it's an off-road bike, but it's also a bike that you can easily commute on or just cruise around town. That's what's kind of unique when you add an e-bike. When you add the motor to the bike, you know, this might be heavy if you didn't have a motor, but with a motor on the road, I will say one continual thing that I hear from people is that it just feels fairly nimble, you know. It doesn't feel heavy, cruises nicely. And when you get to a section like that on the paved path where you hit some bumps and some gravel, it's great to have that suspension. Now geometry, feel the handlebars, the saddle. You know, I've already talked about how comfortable it is. And really, it is kind of a bike where I'm not in a super aggressive riding position. It's not like a mountain bike downhill or even cross country. So you're a little more upright, a little more comfortable, which I think for this bike is exactly what you want to do. Again, I've put lots of different people on the bike, and everyone has loved that reach. They've loved the handlebars, they've loved the grips, they've loved the saddle. Just in general, overall, a very comfortable bike. Let's kind of talk about the motor here. I'm going to open it up. You know, this is that class 3. I've just been cruising right here in 7th gear, 19 miles per hour. And you've got, you know, so I've been in sport mode. I can kick it up to turbo, or I can drop it down to tour, down to eco. I'll go through eco right here as we go under this bridge. So I'm still cruising in 7th gear, 17 miles per hour. Very easy pedal there. I will say, I like the feel of that torque sensor. How if I push more, it gives me a little more speed. You see how I can go to 21, 22, not shifting and not changing the PAS level. That's kind of that modulation that I'm talking about when I was going over the torque sensor. Whereas if it's just the cadence sensor, you're kind of stuck at just one speed. You start turning the cranks, boom, you're 15 miles per hour. You go to PS4, boom, you're at 22 miles per hour. You can't really vary that. So this gives it a more natural feel, lets you vary your speed, and just overall, just better ride quality. Okay, I'm hitting quite a bit of wind here, so I'm going to turn around. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me a little better here. Okay, so we're going to kind of do 0 to 60 here, kick it into turbo, and just let it fly. 17 miles, 20 miles an hour, 21, 22, 25, 27, 28, a little past 28, 29. You push it a little farther past, because again, I'm adding to the motor. Slow back down because there's a lot of wind there and we got people coming. Well, but yeah, really nice responsiveness from that torque sensor from the motor, and just in general, gets up to speed really fast. So powerful motor. I've noticed that it's a little more on the higher end of power, and just great feel. You'll notice you're hearing a little bit of rubbing there on that rotor. Again, we've had this bike for about a year. Probably need to touch up that rear rotor. We have replaced the front rotor. I think it got bent when we were moving bikes around a little bit one day. And that kind of goes back to the components being, you know, Shimano, Tektro, etc. They are easy to replace because it's a bike. You're going to have maintenance. There's no way around that. On your left. Thank you. Have a good one. So again, turbo, not hard to get up to 28 at all. Let's go down to Tour, or Eco actually, and see how fast we can get it going. There we go. Okay, getting up out of the saddle, was able to get it to 28, and I was pushing it. I definitely was putting watts into the pedals. So yeah, if you want to work out, tone it down to Eco. Whew, you'll get a little bit more workout. So that was fun. Let me find some neighborhood section here. We can kind of ride around a little bit so I can talk about how this does as kind of a commuter. Okay, so when you're commuting, I do recommend putting it into turbo. And the reason for that, and class 3, the reason for that is if you need to get up to speed quick, you've got that power to get up to 20 to 28 very quickly. And the more you can go the pace of traffic, the safer you're going to be. Kind of like if you're on the freeway going 35 miles an hour. I mean, you may feel safe because you're going slow, but you're actually more dangerous there. So love that fact that it has that ability to kick that up to class 3 for commuting scenarios. Again, it's a very comfortable ride where if I'm not wanting to get the office sweaty, kicking it to turbo and just kind of lightly pedal it, I'd recommend, you know, for flats, actually just 8, you know, 8th gear, lightly pedal, and you'll still be able to go. I'm going 17, 18 miles per hour right now. Hardly, I'm not having to push much on the pedals. I again like how there's turn signals. Then you got your left, hit it twice to turn it off. Got your right turn signal, turn that off. You've got your lights, and you've got, you know, kind of the main things to make sure that this bike is nice and safe. It also feels comfortable turning, feels nice and sturdy on the frame. Sometimes these big fat tires get a little bit unwieldy and wobbly with the rear hub motor, with the 24-inch tires. When you start moving around, this bike feels very solid underfoot, and is one of the reasons why we recommend it kind of so highly. So even though you have turn signals, don't forget to use your hand signals as well. Some people, most people still aren't used to e-bikes on the road. So use your hand signals, try to make eye contact. Just be extra aware of your surroundings when you're on the road. Now shifting wise, you know, that 8-speed drivetrain gives you a lot of range. I don't have a hill, but again, going up Hellhole was no problem on this. I don't even think I was needing to go below 4th gear. So you're not going to have a hard time going up hills. The bike shifts well. Using the Shimano components makes it easy for any bike mechanic to work on, to replace parts, etc. Braking wise, let's get to the part where I can brake safely here. I'll just pull off to the side. Yeah, those 4-inch tires being knobby, weight of this bike stops it pretty fast, pretty safe. You know, 2-piston brakes could be upgraded to 4-piston, but I mean, to be honest, you stop really well on it. I would definitely not do that until it's time to replace, you know, your brakes if you ever get to that point. So yeah, overall, this is just a good, unique, kind of all-around bike. You can take commuting, you can take off-road. That's how my dad uses it. You know, I basically gave him the pick whatever e-bike you wanted. And this is the one he chose. He tested bikes over several trips down here, tested just dozens and dozens, and this was his favorite. And I think that is something that doesn't shock me. You know, the more time I've spent on the bike, it's just a bike you jump on and go and have a ton of fun with. Again, be it commuting, be it off-road a little bit. Great camping bike, just a great bike in general. Well done. There's a couple squeaks, a couple rattles, but not a ton there that, you know, I feel like they need to improve. So good job, Aventon, on that. And hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have any questions about how it rides, definitely shoot those over to me. Now we are to the mechanics take section. This is actually becoming one of my favorite segments that we're doing. I've got Ben, he's our head mechanic here, has lots of years turning wrenches. So we're gonna jump in and get his take on the Adventure 2. Now, this bike we've had for actually over a year now. So you weren't the one that actually unboxed it, put it together. But with that being said, I'd love to get your take from a mechanic standpoint on, you know, we put a couple hundred miles plus on this bike. What's your take? What do you like from a mechanic standpoint? What do you think the things that Aventon could have done better with the Adventure 2?
I really like this bike, Justin. I like the way the frame feels. I think it's lighter than it looks. It rides really light. I like the standover height, super easy for a guy like me. I've had both hips replaced, so to walk or step over this thing, it sure does make it a lot easier. The derailleur guard, I think, is a really nice piece as well, because if this bike does tip over, it's heavy enough that it could definitely bend to the derailleur or derailleur hanger. The width of the rims, the gauge of the spokes, I like a lot about this bike.
So when you're talking about the width of the rims and the gauge of the spokes, maybe expand on that just a little bit for us.
Understood. So the width of the rim, when you've got a tire this wide, it seats better on the rim and will give a better overall ride feel with less tire flex. If you have a wide tire like this and a really narrow rim, there's just too much overlap and it tends to make the tire feel flexy, and it makes the ride not very confidence inspiring. With regard to the spoke thickness, it's the gauge, so how thick they are. When you get a bike this heavy and a hub motor, the thicker the gauge spoke, the more vivid your acceleration feel will be, and for sure the stronger your brake feel will be as well. There was just less flex from the rim to the hub with a thicker gauge spoke.
Anything else that you really thought Aventon did a good job, again, from that mechanic standpoint? Components wise, spec wise, anything there?
Oh, I like the bike. It's the tires are low enough knob profile. It feels pretty darn good on the street. Riding down here on the dirt roads, it feels good in the corners too. The brakes hook up real well because of the tires. But I think for what you're paying on this bike, it's a really awesome value.
Cool. And what, if anything, would you recommend that Aventon does differently with the next version of this bike?
Oh man, I'll tell you, one of the things that I really like to see, and this is with Aventon and a lot of e-bikes, I'm going to talk about the bottom bracket spindle. This is an older style square taper. It's very, very thin in diameter, and it does tend to flex underneath a heavier rider or a lot of use. I wish that they would use something from Shimano or SRAM or whomever it is that's hollow and a bigger diameter. That's just one thing. I really would like to see a through axle on the fork, through axle hub and fork system. Again, with the bike this big, this tall, and this long, I can feel when I ride it, I can feel the front end flexing, and I equate that to the 9mm threaded axle. With a through bolt, it would just stiffen it up a lot, and this bike deserves that.
Got it. Now, actually, speaking of that, we had you just dive in and do some flex testing. How did this bike do just in general in terms of the stiffness of the frame when you're riding it both with and without weight on that back rack?
The bike rode exceptionally well. It was really solid. And when I say solid, I'll get this thing up to 25 or 30 miles per hour and start diving in and out of parking lot stalls, approaches into driveways, that sort of thing, to really get a feel for the flex over bumps coming in and out. And I really didn't feel any flex at all, which is surprising. With a hub motor and wheels this big, I really thought I would feel more flex, but it seemed pretty darn stiff. I wouldn't say it has any kind of a wobble that makes you feel insecure.
Cool. Yeah, and I've had kind of the same experience, so that's good to hear. No, thank you, Ben, for your thoughts. Again, this is a segment we're going to keep doing on all of our reviews, so if there's other things you would like Ben to, other questions you have for Ben, shoot them in the comments. and we'll just continue to expand on, what I'm calling deep thoughts by Ben, or our mechanics corner. So thank you, Ben. So there you have it. Those are kind of our thoughts on the Adventure 2. I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe to the channel. We're going to have a lot of other reviews coming out. And as always, if you have questions, drop those questions down below. But if I have to summarize the Adventure 2, I just think it's spot on. This bike is not a brand new release. It's been out for a year or so, and it is still kind of just one of the leaders of the pack and the standard setting for kind of the sub 2000 26-inch fat tire bikes. I think it's earned a lot of accolades, a lot of best picks by different outlets and media publications, and I would agree with it. If you're someone that's looking for a bike that you can either commute on, take it off-road, not single track, but off-road, camping, dirt roads, HOV roads, those types of things, I think this is a really good option for you. Again, if you're looking for this style bike, rear hub motor, sub $2,000 price point, good quality components from a brand that I think has proven that they've got a lot of staying power. They're one of the most popular, highest selling brands in the US, and I don't expect that to change, especially if they keep kind of pushing the envelope on the Adventure series. I would expect that to happen, and we'll see kind of what happens later on in the year with this bike. But right now, this bike is still super solid. Great job from Aventon on this.